Now that we know the basics of triangles and the parts of a triangle and how to label, now we can get into the good stuff, which means we're going to be doing proofs soon. So a few more definitions that we need to know before we really dive into that. Congruent triangles. What are congruent triangles? They are triangles with the same shape and size. This means that all corresponding parts, angles and sides are congruent. Okay, this is a big, big deal. All right, if you look at this congruency statement, notice when triangles are congruent, we write a congruency statement. So like we've talked about before, that means that angle A is congruent to angle D. Even though they're shifted differently, I want you to notice these parts. Angle A is congruent to angle D. So when I set up my congruency statement, I have to read angle A is congruent to angle D. Angle B is congruent to angle E, because look at those parts. And then angle C, it has 3 tick marks, is congruent to angle F. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Notice all of these corresponding parts. So A corresponds with D. That's why their positions are the same. B corresponds with E. That's why these guys' positions are the same. And C corresponds with F. That's why these positions are the same. This is what I call my Big Daddy statement. This is huge. It allows you to say so many things. Just by looking at this, I can say that angle A is congruent to angle D just by looking at the positions. I can say that angle B is congruent to angle E just by positions. And I can say that angle C is congruent to angle F just by positions. But notice I said angles and sides. So here are my angle statements. Look how I'm watching for my sides to be congruent. I can look at the picture and I can see that AB is going to be congruent to ED. But I can also look at my statement and look at the positioning that AB is going to be congruent to DE. That's why this statement is so powerful. Just the positioning. AB is congruent to DE. I can say that BC, side BC, is congruent to side EF. I can say that AC is congruent to side DF. And if I look at my picture, it's going to tell me the same thing. So, big, big statement here. That's called the congruency statement. And what it allows you to do is a valid congruency statement must match all corresponding angles and sides. If you just went looking at your picture and said angle A and F are congruent, my tick marks don't match up. The corresponding parts have to match up. All right, so cpctc, what does it mean? It is you guys always want to abbreviate. This is the only valid abbreviation that you can do when we start proofs. And it's cpctc. So notice, corresponding parts of a congruent triangle are congruent. All that means that if we know 2 triangles are congruent, just like we did up here, then we know that every pair of the corresponding part is also congruent. So that's what it means. CPCTC, corresponding parts of a congruent triangle are congruent. CPCTC. So when you look at this Big Daddy statement, just by looking at this picture, not even a picture, just by looking at this statement, I can say that angle J is congruent to angle P. I can say that angle K is congruent to angle Q. And I can say that angle L is congruent to angle R. That's just by the positioning. If I look at my sides, I can say that JK is congruent to the first 2 letters over here, which are PQ. I can say that KL is congruent to QR. And I can say that JL is congruent to PR. Okay? So that's all my congruent angles and sides. So what's another valid congruency that I can make? Well, I could shift up the lettering here. I could say that angle or triangle LKJ is congruent to triangle. The position still needs to hold up. RQP. So no matter which way I arrange it, J and P are always going to be congruent. J and P are always congruent. K and Q are always going to be congruent. K and Q are going to be congruent. L and R are always going to be congruent. L and R are always going to be congruent. You can't mix that up. You can rearrange it, but make sure those corresponding parts always stay true. All right, if we look at number 3. So here's what I have to do. It gives me a given statement, and now I'm going to make my markings because it wants me to see that. You could just look at the positioning. Okay, you could kind of ignore these and just look here. And you could see that KM is going to be congruent to AC. You could say that CY is going to be congruent to MP. You could say that PK is congruent to YA. You could say that angle Y is congruent to angle P. You could say that angle K is congruent to angle A. You could say that ACY is congruent to KMP. You could say that triangle MPK is congruent to triangle CYA. That's funny. And you could say that YAC is congruent to PKM. All I'm saying is I can't mess that up. Now, because this given statement has pictures, I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. I'm going to say that KP is congruent to AY. I'm going to say that PM is congruent to YC. And I'm going to see that KM, 1, 2, 3, is congruent to CA. I could then say that angle K is congruent to angle A. I could say that P is congruent to angle Y. And M is congruent to C. So that's what my picture would look like diagrammed. All right. Now, if I want to fill in missing pieces, you just have to read these triangles correctly. I know that angle S is going to be congruent to angle B over here. So I'm going to, if that's 67, I know that this is 67 degrees. I know that angle N is going to be congruent to angle W over here. So if that's 82, W is going to be 82. And I know that there are 180 degrees in a triangle, so I could figure out what angle F is going to be. And angle F is going to be 31 degrees, 180 minus 159, and there's 149, excuse me. And so I get 31 degrees. So if F is 31 degrees, T is 31 degrees. I can look at the picture and know that ST is going to be congruent to BF right here. So that's 17 centimeters. I know that WS is going to be congruent to NB. So that's 9 centimeters. And I know that FN is going to be congruent to TW, so that's 14 centimeters. So I am just piecing that together based on the picture. So now I can fill it in. BN is 9 centimeters, TW is 14 centimeters, BF is 17 centimeters. I know that angle W is going to be 82 degrees. I know that angle B is 67 degrees, and I know that F is 31 degrees. So all I've done is I'm just looking at my Big Daddy statement, and I'm drawing from that those corresponding parts. So see if you can do number 5 on your own, and I'll fill in the blanks for you. And if we're not getting the same thing, then come and see me. So pause it, and now you're back. All right, so A on number 5 is going to be 18 feet. BXY is going to be 27 feet, making ZY 27 feet. D is going to be 38 degrees, and it's an isosceles triangle, so if Z is 71 degrees, J is going to be 71 degrees. Okay, so now let's look here. I've got to fill in the blanks. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to have to remember, to make an equation, you can only have one known variable to solve for X. So I know that UV right here is going to be congruent to TS. And it says TS is 53. So I know that 12x minus 7 is going to be equal to 53. That's going to allow me to solve for X. Look at RS. RS is going to be congruent to VW. So if RS is 5y minus 33, VW is going to be 57. And then UW, if UW is 3z plus 14, that's going to be equal to TR, which is 50. So hopefully everybody saw how I set these up. And when I solve, you guys don't need me for this, but when I solve, x gives me 5. When I add 33 to both sides here, I get 190 divide by 5, and I get 3, 4, 8, 38. Y equals 38. That's not right, is it? Minus 33 equals 57. So I add 33 to both sides. Oh, that's just 90. That's not. Sorry. I know y'all get mad when I make a mistake, but I don't know how to edit. So for the power of TV. So when you divide by 5, 5 goes into 9 one time with 4 left over. Y is 18. Not what I said earlier. And then Z, I subtract 14 on both sides, and I get 3Z equals 36, and then Z equals 12. So that should be getting you those right answers. All right, so that's how you do number 6. Flip down to number 18. Now this one you don't have a picture. If making a picture is easier, which I always say draw a picture, do it, it's easier. But because of my Big Daddy statement, there's so much powerful information in that, I really don't need to draw a triangle. So I'm going to look at DE. So DE is 18, and I'm going to set DE equal to JK. So I'm going to look for JK. There it is, JK right here. And I'm going to set 18 equal to 3y minus 21. Then I'm going to look at EF. EF is 23, and I'm going to set EF equal to KL. So I'm going to look for KL. KL's not in there, so nothing, so that can't do anything for me. So now I'm going to see DF. DF is 9x minus 23, and I'm going to set that equal to JL, which is 7x minus 11. Okay, so that's all the information that I can use right now. So I'm going to solve for y, so I add 21 to both sides, and I get 40 equals 3y. So y equals 3 goes into 4 one time with, oh shoot, that's not going to work. Hang on, I've screwed up. You'll get so mad when I screw up. Add 21 to both sides. That's because it's 39. Okay, it wasn't a big screw up. Divide by 3, and I get 1. Y equals 13. All right, so when I look over here, and I set this guy up, I'm going to subtract 7x to both sides. I get 2x minus 23 equals negative 11. I add 23 to both sides, and I get 2x equals 12, and then x equals 6. I think that's right. Yes, that should be right. So that's what I'm doing on these guys. If you have questions or we're not getting the same thing, let me know. Good luck.